Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy Chad Fellers, we have casual talk about the challenges and successes in medical affairs with the most exciting and impactful professionals in pharma. As always, we have another great one for you today, so stick around.
Welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles. I am your host, Chad Fellers, along with my nifty sidekick, Mary Morton. How are you, Mary?
I'm terrific.
Have you been out in the sun? Looks like you've got a little bit of a burn or a tan. Do you tan typically, or is it more of a burn?
I usually start by burning.
Okay.
And then I tan. Oh, burn, peel, burn, tan. In about that order. Yes.
Okay. Well, that was a little too much information, I guess, for our listeners, but I asked the question, so I guess I get that kind of.
You did.
I guess I get
well,
kind
you
of that
look
response.
like you've been maybe on the golf course quite a bit yourself.
I've been on the golf course. I've been in the woods that are next to the golf course. I've been to the ponds that are on the side of the golf course as well, too, looking for golf balls. So I've gotten to experience all the different parts of the layouts of these courses here as of late. Not getting to. My cost per stroke is still really low, but nevertheless, I digress. We can actually talk about other important things that our listeners may want to hear about as well too. When we think about between sunburns and golf shots and things like that, we've got another great topic today from one of my old colleagues and still friends. I think he still claims me as a friend anyway. So Chris Hansen, we're going to be talking about metrics, really shifting from metrics to meaning. And I can't wait to hear his perspective on this. But with that, why don't you tee up our guest for us, Mary?
I would be happy to. Okay, so we are welcoming to the show Chris Hansen, PhD, got his PhD, let me see if I'm saying this right, from The Ohio State University.
Oh, no, I forgot.
You have to say it like that.
Yes.
Just like the University of Texas. So my company actually had the great pleasure of placing Chris in a position in the early part of his career, not his first MSL role, but one of them. And a lot has happened since 2014, 2015 timeframe. And so we're going to learn a whole lot more about Chris. He continued working as an MSL, went to Teva for a while, and is currently the Division General Manager, U.S. Medical Affairs Rare Disease for the East region for Sanofi. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a party. We'll find out how happy you're going to be here in just a second. So I've got a couple rapid fire questions I want to ask you. We're gonna let our listeners in on our little party here to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm only going to hit you with two questions. So the first question is, you're familiar with walk-up music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what would your walk-up song be?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. I'm going to be super cheesy and say Don't Stop Believin' by Journey.
So first of all, I got to know, why do you think that's cheesy? But then also, why did you choose it? Cheesy.
I chose it because I think in this industry, in the role, you can't give up your optimism. You're going to hit so many roadblocks and you're going to, encounter challenges, in your career, but also in the role in field medical. So you can't stop believing. You got to keep pushing through and have your eye on the prize.
I love it. Next question. Tell us something people would be surprised to know about you.
Let's see, what would something people would be surprised to know about me? I have a complete zoo at my house, literally and figuratively. So I have four crazy kids. They're running around like wild animals on a day-to-day basis. But I live out in the boonies, so we have all sorts of animals on our property. So we have um, two dogs, we have cats, we have 9 chickens, we have a duck that goes back and forth between our yard and our neighbor.
That's great.
And we have a problem saying no to pets. So whenever our kids want a pet, we just keep adding to the Hansen Zoo.
I like that. And those chickens are probably a very hot commodity right now.
They are. We actually just doubled the size of our coop because we're moving from 9 chickens to 15 chickens. We need those eggs, and our neighbors need
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, exactly. You can make lots of friends. You can go back to the old bartering system. And what do they have to swap with you? Well,
That's right.
awesome.
That's right.
Well, very exciting. Now everybody knows a little bit more about you, Chris, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to Chad here so we can get this party started.
I've learned something. I've learned something new about Chris today too. All these chickens, holy cow! And then a duck. Wow.
I will say I'm a nerdy scientist by day, and I'm a fully embraced redneck by night. If you came to my house, you might be surprised, Chad.
One day, maybe one day, we can actually make that happen.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, it is great to have you on. I think one of the things we didn't really tee up in the beginning of your intro on the bio is you are also an author, and you recently had a publication in the MSL Society Journal around this very topic, around metrics to meaning. So with that, before we actually get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey in medical affairs?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a PhD scientist by training. I've been in the industry for over a decade. I've worked at small, mid-sized, large pharmaceutical companies, and I've worn a lot of different hats. So I've worked in the field as an MSL. I've been an MSL manager, been a medical director, and now I'm a Divisional General Manager for our East Medical team. So I've made a couple different moves in my career through different therapeutic areas. I currently work in the rare disease space and completely love what I do. I think this is such a fun industry, and I love that at the end of the day, we're translating therapies to patients. And I think working in medical affairs, you get to work so close to that. And I think it's just, we have such an exciting role within healthcare.
You have several experiences that I'm learning a lot about it as well too. I know that for the listeners that don't know Chris and I's journey, we actually worked together at Teba several years ago. I guess back in, I think you were mentioned earlier, 2015 or somewhere around there. So yeah, I've got to follow you from afar and know what an amazing MSL you were, how quickly you adapted, and it's no surprise that you've made had so many opportunities that have come your way. And that passion that you had way back then when you first started is still clear now as far as the job. It clearly shines through. So let's dig into a little bit of your experiences, specifically like transitioning into the leadership position. And then with that, how has this particular topic become such an area of passion for you?
Yeah, sure. So I love strategy. And during the COVID time period, I had an opportunity where I was able to work in headquarters role and work on developing a medical narrative and scientific strategy that was disseminated to the field. What I loved about that role is that it's really was an opportunity to drive the conversations that the field was having. In my current role as a people manager, I'm dealing with strategy on a different level. I'm dealing more with tactical strategy. It's more coaching and engaging with hard to access physicians and developing relationships with people who may not want to have relationships with someone from industry. So For me, I love the tactical end of things. I love people management. I love coaching. And I think the role that we have in the field is so closely linked to patient care that just lights a fire under you. That's what gets me excited every day to then motivate the team to do what they do. But to your question of what got me excited about this topic, the topic of metrics, people either love it or hate it. They hear the word metrics and their hair raises, right? So I think the topic of metrics has always been a polarizing topic within our field, and to me, it is so important that we focus not on checking boxes, but on driving impact. So when we think about, being out there, engaging with physicians, um, you know, beginning with the end in mind, as far as having a strategic plan for each and every single engagement. I think there can be a lot of people who are out in the field and they may have 400 interactions in a year, but you have to question, are those activities really driving impact? Are you really making a difference? So I think that, the easy way of describing MSL impact is pointing to a number. It's saying this person has had this many interactions per month, this many interactions over the course of a year, when in reality, you don't know how many of those interactions were fist bumps versus actually having impactful meetings that are driving change. So for me, I really think that it's important to, socialize this idea that, you know, medical affairs teams drive impact in many different ways. And when we describe the success of an individual MSL or a team, we can't point to a single metric to do that. We really need to take a step back and look more holistically at all the different activities that field medical does.
Yes. Amen. Hallelujah. Whatever adjective or expression you want to say. I think this idea of shaking hands and kissing babies, I mean, I think that that's always been, and I've actually known MSLs that may have a dinner program or educational program that they have in a location. They go by the office in the morning just to say hello. That's an interaction. And then they go back and then they have the dinner interaction as well too. So that's two interactions that they can say that they've had when really one was just a tee up for the other, right? So I mean, I think The Tyranny of Metrics is one of my favorite books. We actually did one of our podcasts on that last year. I mean, metrics are great in so many ways if they're used appropriately, and you can always measure things, but are they really showing much impact, or which ones are you choosing to use as coaching tools? What are you using to report to show the value? Though oftentimes we use both of those in the same or for the same purpose, which can lead to the mess that we've created, quite honestly, within medical affairs at times. So I can't wait to dig in more and hear some of this with this. Before we get any further, though, why don't you share any key takeaways that you have for the conversation we're going to have today?
Yeah. So, I mean, some key takeaways. First of all, moving to an impact driven model does not mean metrics are dead. Metrics are always going to be an element of what we do. When I think of describing success as an MSL, I think holistically. So, the idea or the notion that metrics are dead, I mean, that's not reality. We work in an industry that's driven by data. By saying metrics are dead is like saying you're going to get approval for a drug without having endpoints to a clinical trial. You need to have data to describe what you do. But as far as describing success of a strategy or as a team, you need to be able to really take a step back and look at the big picture. And considering all the different activities that medical does, there's not one single number that describes that. So I think for me, a big takeaway would be that when you're describing success of an individual MSL or a team, you need to think holistically, and that's going to include consideration of quantitative and qualitative measures comprehensively to describe success.
I love that expression. And I don't know if that's just yours or if somebody else mentioned this, but running on an impact driven model doesn't mean that metrics are dead. I've never heard anybody say that before, but I love that. So I'm curious about the whole article. How did that even come about? I mean, what inspired you to write the article? Did somebody come to you and say, "Hey, do you have any thoughts on this?" I mean, how'd that come about?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. Chad and I have a mutual friend who I won't call him out on the call, but we were catching up recently and just talking about some of the craziness of metrics and assessing teams. And it's very clear that, there are some organizations and some teams that will set certain bars for expectations without actually considering what happens and what those numbers mean. So this really came organically as a discussion, and we said, hey, let's write about it. Let's put something together, and submitted it. And I think the MSL Journal and the society is a great opportunity to share best practices, ideas with other medical affairs leaders and other medical affairs people. So I thought it was a fun way to talk about a potentially polarizing topic.
Yeah, definitely polarizing. And, I wanted to mention something earlier is, because I'm in the business of talking to people about what they like and don't like about their jobs. I think if I could get a dime for every time somebody said to me, if you gave me a number, I can hit it, as kind of like their response to the metrics I'm being given are sort of meaningless and nobody cares about what's going on behind that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah. I hear that a lot.
Garbage in, garbage out. If you give
Mm-hmm.
somebody a metric or an expectation that's unreasonable, they're going to meet it. People are going to do their job, but they're going to meet it by giving you crappy data. They're going to give you a lot of handshakes in the hallways or fist bumps by a poster, as opposed to actually having deep, meaningful conversations.
And I have to tell you, the next scientific or medical congress that I go to, I'm going to start watching for all these little fist bumps by the posters. Yeah. I'm going to go up to those guys and go, I saw that. Did you mark that one down?
So with this, I think that there is this just occurred to me. I think one of the reasons we've created a lot of the actions that our teams often do, right? So to the whole structure of, you've got to engage 300 people, 300 interactions in the course of a year from an MSL perspective. I mean, don't think about, well, it covers 3 states or it covers 6 states, or that these engagements last for 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or 3. It doesn't matter. It's 3, so we are, we're at cause on, and for some of the quality of these types of interactions. So you discussed the need for a shift towards outcome-based metrics. So talk a little bit more about what you mean. Can you give us some examples of what this might look like?
Yeah, and I want to take a step back to something you said, how we really have created the problem. I think as an industry and as, many companies, this is a way to easily collect data. Quantitative metrics are super easy. Qualitative metrics aren't. And whenever you're thinking about driving impact, you tell somebody to meet 400 people in a year, you set a clear bar, they're going to meet it. Think of how much more challenging it would be if you said, I want you to drive impact in your interactions. That really raises the bar in a different way, that forces them to think strategically about each and every interaction in a way that's going to result in meaningful change. So whenever I think about, mixing quantitative and qualitative metrics, I think from a quantitative standpoint, the easy ones we already know. It's, how many interactions do you have? How frequently? What's the duration? One that I do hold value in is the mix of proactive and reactive interactions, because something I always tell my team or other people coming into the field, that once you build a true relationship, a peer level relationship with a KOL, they start calling on you just as much as you call on them. So I think, being able to assess how many proactive and reactive activities, I think that is telling. There's something there. But from a qualitative standpoint, let's think about the things you can't put an easy number on. Is this person collaborating cross-functionally? Are they playing well in the sandbox? Are they getting feedback from internal partners regarding their way of working? Are they, internally training the commercial team? Are they, aligning with global appropriately? So I think you can assess things like that with 360 surveys. Similarly, you can assess feedback directly from a KOL. I think, some of the highest performing MSLs that I've seen are ones where when I'm on a field ride with them, their KOL pulls me aside and is like, oh my gosh, this is the best MSL that I have ever worked with before. They go above and beyond this way, that way, and this. They are able to really speak to the abilities and the way that the MSL has changed their practice or their way of thinking. So I think, qualitative measures of 360 feedback from cross-functional partners, from KOLs. I think actionable insights are another area where you can really drive qualitative assessments of somebody's performance. Are they collecting insights that are changing the internal strategy? Are they producing a post hoc analysis? Let's say you just launch a drug and they're collecting insights from their meetings, and all of a sudden the company turns around and publishes a post hoc based on their insight. Like, you are directing data generation. You may be working with somebody on an ISS and have a study concept. Like, there are so many intangible ways that we drive value that are qualitative in that nature, and I think have to be factored in whenever we're thinking about the performance of an individual person or a team.
I think it's very well said. I think even just the advancements now with AI, with the new platforms and things like that, allow us to really kind of stretch our ideas beyond what we are. What was so easily to be able to attain within Viva, right? As far as the number of presentations that have been done, the number of interactions that we talked about. I think that there are ways that you can look at claims data, you can look at population health types of information. You can have targeted conversations specific to certain data points. You can be able to measure those and then track. I love the idea about insight questions. I know at one of my former teams, we put in a standard metric of like 70% of the interactions had to have a key insight question that were asked that allowed that room for bumping into somebody at a congress or having a group presentation, but making sure that there was an alignment to medical strategy. And it was really understanding, hey, does our current medical strategy, does that hit the mark? Or are we missing something? Where, what is an indicator for the overarching business? And so how do we start thinking about ways of really trying to push that? And but that opens up a whole nother can of worms in the sense of we've got to make sure that our teams are seeing that the information that they're collecting, the insights that they're collecting, are being put into use, how to leverage that, et cetera. So, there's so many ways that we can continue to advance it. So I love what you're talking about here.
I think, It's going to be different from company to company, disease
Yep.
state to disease state, strategy to strategy. So I think however you're measuring success is going to have some nuances of differences. So like think about the rare disease space, for example. You know, these field teams are having discussions about diseases that they don't train about in medical school, right? So like your job becomes not one where you're just differentiating products, but you're also raising education with the goal of shrinking a diagnostic odyssey. So I think something for me, a valuable, potentially quantitative or qualitative metric could be the identification of patients. You know, if you have done focused disease state education that results in a patient being identified, that is so meaningful, and it's not always easy to put a clear number behind that, but it's something that needs to be taken into consideration whenever you're determining, is a strategy successful, is an MSL successful.
One of the things that I hear, I guess, a lot when I'm asking questions about, qualitative versus quantitative metrics, where there is a bit of an intersection, is with some hiring managers are like, what I'm trying to get across to my MSLs that if you hear something interesting that you believe is an insight and you record it with that one thought leader, and then you hear it again and again, that some MSLs don't realize, you need to keep recording it with every, make note of it with every thought leader, not it, because I would guess maybe in terms of quantity, that's relevant, right? It's how many times you're hearing it from different people, whatever it is.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, that is a way that you identify and quantify trends. And that becomes so important as you're communicating what we're hearing in the field to our internal headquarters partners. So our cross-functional team needs to know that, we're hearing this not just in California, but also in Florida and in Texas, and a lot of times, our team is the boots on the ground. We're the eyes and the ears of the company. So when we hear things, we're able to act on them quickly. The challenge then becomes, how are you communicating it? Are you collecting organic insights where it's all free text? Or are you, as you suggested, Chad, are you doing like a survey type question where you can quickly populate, trends and bar graphs about what you're hearing from different types of specialties, different states? I think, you really need to make sure that how you're collecting those insights is efficiently communicated.
Yeah. I think that this is where I'm getting really excited about kind of the next level of this. One of the things that I've worked on in previous lives and working even actively now is this idea of being able to do that question in a survey form, but then also having a free text insight as well to be able to communicate the why behind why they selected the answer. So you could say, we asked this question. We asked 100 providers that placement and therapy, and what we found was 60% said that it was going to be first line, and the reason is because dosing administration. The majority said dosing and administration. So you're actually, it's going beyond just that survey, like a market survey, but it really is understanding the behavior that's driving the answer that can help point you to, okay, maybe we really need to lean in on this particular area, or maybe we need to focus more on this area to help kind of strengthen the confidence, et cetera, right? So it's just like powering a study. I mean, if you can power that, it really ensures the confidence that your teams are asking the right questions, and that you're on the right trajectory from a long term. That's where you can really kind of start separating it. You can leverage the peer-to-peer trusted scientific relationship that's been developed, right? That's where you can really start trusting that you're getting, it's not just an ad board that they're giving you information because you paid them to tell you what you want to hear, right? But you've created a foundation where transparency can be had. So I'm excited to kind of see where AI will allow us to be able to augment kind of what we're doing in that area.
And that's where I think we've gotten so much more advanced over the last 2 years because, I've been on teams in the past where you get Excel sheets with hundreds and hundreds of organic insights that you need to sift through. Now you can have AI tell you trends, tell you, what the KOLs are saying in a more efficient and timely manner. So yeah, I think we're making leaps and bounds.
Good. I think somebody else agrees with you in the background as well too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, apologies.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, I'm totally hoping for a chicken to come in.
that might be possible. I won't put it past them.
I love it. So we talked a little bit about this, but want to kind of dig in a little bit further. You highlight the evolution of field-based metrics in the article beyond just reach and frequency to really highlight the value of impact. So can you describe a few of the other various measures that you have in mind that you would like to see potentially be that next iteration?
Yeah, so what I envision as the future of describing impact to the field is really thinking about success kind of like a scorecard. So it's not focusing on any one measure, but it's really thinking about the holistic activities of a field medical person that includes qualitative and quantitative measures. So with a scorecard, it requires the leadership to identify what are the core values, what is the purpose of the team, what is strategically relevant to this team within this TA at this company. So a scorecard, I think, is going to be different on any team that you're looking at. But once you identify some of those core values and core themes, you can turn qualitative metrics into numbers. So, my view would be a scorecard including things like duration of a meeting, number of meetings, proactive, reactive interactions, but also qualitative measures like insights. So, is the person that you're looking at their performance, are they bringing in insights that are producing change? And that's maybe a simple yes no question, but I think you can do some fun math, impute a value, and put a number behind a qualitative measure. From a cross-functional standpoint, I think that you can get feedback from the salesperson they're working with, the market access person, patient services. You can get solicited feedback internally just as you can externally. So you can think about doing a 360 survey with HCPs. You can use that from measures with a field ride. I also think it's really important to think about how you're supporting CSU and pipeline initiatives. So as MSLs, you work as boots on the ground for the clinical studies unit. So are you working to support recruitment issues? Are you identifying new sites? Are you working in a collaborative way that's advancing pipeline strategy in addition to collecting novel insights? So I think for me, a scorecard would capture all of these quantitative and qualitative things. And kind of similar to a report card, you can ultimately end up with a percent attainment. And I think from there, you can establish benchmarks. So, after you identify core values as a leadership team, you can say, okay, this person is meeting 80% of our core values. Maybe this person's only meeting 40%. And I think that's a way that you can look at performance more holistically rather than just saying, well, this person had 556 interactions last year. Clearly, they're the MSL of the year. To me, that's the lazy way to describe performance. The more challenging but more impactful way is holistically, in this case, looking at a scorecard.
I love all of these ideas. And, Chad and I talk about how he and I are both like idea factories. Like we come up with lots of ideas, but I can't think of a single reason why all of these things are so amazing, why we wouldn't just go head first into this. But I guess there probably got to be some barriers. I mean, are you dealing with anything? You seeing some of that across the industry, barriers to getting all this stuff through?
Yeah. So, I think the challenges are the fact that a lot of what medical does, the impact that we drive, doesn't happen overnight. Think about, we mentioned a publication, for example. Let's say an MSL has a meeting, they bring back an insight that you need, as a company, we need to strategically produce this post hoc analysis. That may happen, but it may take 6 months. It may take 9 months to get there. So I think, the challenge is that these metrics don't happen overnight. So there has to be an open mind as far as impact that is in progress versus impact that has already taken place. And I think from a quantitative standpoint, sometimes you have to look through the noise. You may have somebody with 500 interactions a year, very noisy. It may seem like they're doing a lot, but when you look into the actual impact that they're driving, it may not be there. So I think the challenge really lies with leadership to be able to determine what is truly impactful versus not, and then having those difficult conversations in the event that you identify a situation where impact is not being made.
Are there any of these sort of values that you're finding difficult to report?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the more challenging metrics or qualitative metrics is probably the actionable clinical insights, because to one person, a clinical insight may be very meaningful. To another, it may not. So I think there's a level setting discussion that needs to take place where just because somebody feels like an insight is meaningful, it may not be addressing a true gap, or it may not be in line with what the strategy is aiming for. So I think that insights are a particular very important, but also a very sticky area where it really requires level setting on what is truly an impactful insight versus what's not.
Yes, it could be something that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Which we learn all kinds of interesting things when we talk to you folks every day. But maybe it's not impactful. Maybe it's just something that's really cool and interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I told you, I'm a nerdy scientist by training. So I love talking about preclinical science. So somebody may put in insights regarding MOA, that is super meaningful and impactful in the basic science world. But whenever we talk about clinical translation and, getting ready to launch phase 3 assets, those insights might not be business relevant. So, having that discussion that, yes, that is important within that space, but it's not important to our business. That's a level of conversation that's sometimes tough. It's tough for people to hear.
Yeah, I bet because it was something that they were really excited about. But like you said, at the end of the day, maybe it's not something that impacts the business. Yeah.
This is one of the things, honestly, Chris, that was easily identifiable with you, and just even listening back to your interview, right? I mean, your ability to, very smart, very able to dig into the science, love the science, embrace that, but then also be able to put on the business hat as well too, and to think, okay, how is this really going to impact patient care? And then down the road, like, how does this really translate to tangible experiences that are faced in the field? So I think that that's something that we have to always be mindful of, even though that we're coming from the science side of the house, et cetera, is how does this really play out in the real world, and how do we communicate things like that? Are we asking the right questions, providing that information in that context, supported by science, versus it just being the scientific conversation altogether, right? So it is a both and. It's not an either or type of thing. And the more that we can really adapt to that, I think that's some of the things that set those that are exceptional aside, that are valued as that true peer. I'm also going to say this too, this whole thing around the 400 or 500, it's not because for the listeners, it's not because Chris is lazy, because Chris is one of the ones that used to drive those numbers as well too. He had those, but they were quality, to be clear. So it's not an issue about going for large numbers, but it was always exceeding the goal. It was never to attain what the expectation was, right? I mean, the number of engagements that he and others have come as a result of the relationships that they developed. It's with a fellowship director. Oh, will you come in and engage my fellows? Oh, like I'll never forget, like in Missouri, right? I mean, being able to bring together 2 fellowship programs together to sit down and have journal clubs, right? Those are the types of things that kind of lead to those numbers. So we're not discounting trying to achieve those. I think it's when you set unrealistic expectations, there's a law of diminishing returns, and that's not an easy thing to navigate, but it is something that we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful of the therapeutic areas, the populations. Treating asthma may be different than treating a rare disease, right? I mean, whatever that may look like, and we have to be mindful of those as far as how we're going to do this. I think one of the things, Chris, I think that I struggle with around the outcome measures or even the scorecard type of thing is the manual work that's required to do that. I think that one of the things that is a gap that I've seen is there's not a standardized system to be able to collect that type of information. Oftentimes the individual is left with trying to just capture the key things that they did and try to file them away for quarterly reviews or end of year reviews, those types of things. So I think however we can move this forward to where it's more of an automated type of process, or there's a system that can help capture this similar to Viva, the better that we'll be on. You want to share any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, the quantitative end of assessments, that's going to be easy. You're going to have that super quick, and that's a metric that you can get and act upon very easily. I think the qualitative end is totally a challenge. You're right. It's not really possible to automate a lot of those assessments. I think, you can I think when rolling something like this out, you need to be transparent with your team, and you need to let them know what are the measures that you're looking for. So I think, having them regularly send you, what are examples that they feel are actionable clinical insights, soliciting feedback from commercial colleagues or their HCPs, that can happen on a quarterly basis. I think, discussing what is going to be measured and kind of putting the ball in that person's court so they have a chance to tell you what they're doing. And then it's the discussion of like, okay, is that really impactful? And that type of back and forth communication needs to happen to be able to make a scorecard be filled out in the first place. But I am a firm believer that, point that you made, like, if you're doing your job and you're doing it well, you're going to look back at the end of the year and like the numbers are going to be there. You're going to be like, oh, I did have 400 interactions, but that was not your focus. I think people who are good MSLs and are driving impact, they set their bar to be able to improve patient care, drive impact, advance the strategy. And then secondarily, the numbers, they support that, but that's not necessarily their North Star. I think it's one of many measures of success. And then, the numbers fall into place. Like, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, the numbers are going to work themselves out.
Yeah, I think part of this goes back to your previous notion about being intentional in your planning and approaching meetings with the mindset of how do I make impact, and that kind of goes along with the idea of like what's the WIFM for the KOL or the people you're engaging. If you're not aligning what their interests are to what the company, where they could be a potential partnership or something that the company has to give. If you will do those, these things will be automatic, right? I mean, the relationships will develop, the metrics will take care of themselves, etc. But it requires that intentionality that can lead to the outcome that you're wanting, right? This impact that you're wanting to have, and then being able to clearly define that is aligning that. But it does take some planning, and it requires that we give space to our teams to be able to plan about this too, to not be driven by the numbers, where they can actually be intentional with this, and those things will come. But it does come with a level of trust, I think, from a leadership component as well too. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it's trust, and it's also recognizing that, you know, not every HCP needs the same thing. Not
that's
every
right.
institution needs the same thing. So how an MSL is interacting with a neurologist may be very different than how they're interacting with a pulmonologist. How they're interacting at Duke may be very different than how they interact with UCLA. So it's the idea of the activities and the engagement really need to be personalized, so that, you know, the right message, the right person at the right time is going into what the HCP needs or the account needs, and you need your assessment of their performance to reflect that. So like that notion that, you know, the one size fits all approach, I think that's a way of the past. I think, you know,
Yeah.
you and I both, I think, came from a world where, you know, there's a national strategy and you execute it with every single person that you talk to. A high performing MSL is going to personalize that strategy based on who they're talking to and what the institutional needs are. So I think how we judge performance needs to reflect that.
So let's go back to as this has been great discussion. So just a couple more things before we wrap up this podcast. Lots of great takeaways. You mentioned in the article, I think it discusses around this multidimensional assessment of qualitative and quantitative metrics to describe medical impact. Can you describe or tell us a little bit more about what you mean there?
Yeah, so that really comes down to the scorecard approach. So I think, you know, a good scorecard is going to have 10 measures. Those measures, some may be quantitative, some may be qualitative, and they're going to describe the activities holistically of what they're doing in the field. So let's say you have 10 values, 5 are quantitative, 5 are qualitative. You're going to be able to impute numbers for each of them. So you
Okay.
let's say this person had 300 interactions for the year. Let's say they had, I don't know, 200 clinical insights and their average meeting duration was 45 minutes. Qualitative measures could be that cross-functional feedback, could be KOL feedback, could be actionable insights, you know, examples where insights change strategy. Or it could be patient identification. All of those measures or core values are captured in a scorecard. And then from that, you can look at the percent attainment. So of these 10 measures that you put together in a scorecard, what percent of them did you meet? Did you meet 70%? Did you meet 20%? That's kind of my vision for holistically assessing the performance.
We're gonna have to have you on definitely. If you see this idea come into fruition or ways, I'd love to kind of unpack it and see how this has played out and learned your learnings from it, etc. The vision is definitely compelling, certainly.
Would love to.
So why don't we leave our leadership listeners with a call to action or a challenge? I mean, if you could drop a challenge on our listeners on what they can do with all of this that they've just learned, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think my challenge would be to really embrace the complexity of our role and think holistically when we're measuring performance. You know, we have a function that does so many impactful things that no other field function can do. So when we're thinking of measuring success, think about the big picture, think about the core values that person is addressing, and think about how you can judge performance in that way, and not just focusing on, the high level number of fist pumps. Metrics, the quantitative aspects are never going to go away. Those are still important, and they're still going to be there when we're measuring performance, but they shouldn't be the North Star. The North Star should be, are we, as a medical person or a medical team, are we driving actionable change that's improving the life of patients? That's my call to action.
Love it.
No, I love it, Mary. That's my
Sorry.
phrase, is love it. It's not yours, but I guess you can love it as well too. You can like it, kind of like
I like it a whole lot.
Cold Stone Creamery, right? There's the different sizes, like it, love it, etc. Oh well, we can definitely tell.
I don't frequent the Cold Stone Creamery. We have Amy's ice cream.
Well,
you guys should have Amy's ice cream while you're here.
Okay, well,
we will add that.
I'm still waiting on the barbecue. You said, or I'm sorry, the wing contest, Mary, that you said that you were going to send me. So
you ever watch Hot Ones, Chris? You ever watch Hot Ones?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a Hot Ones challenge with Chad.
Oh, I love that.
So she says, Chris.
Now I'm gonna record it. It's gonna be to ask Chad anything while his mouth is on fire.
Oh, that would be awesome. Chris, this has been real
subscribers for that, Chad.
This has been really good. Thanks for the challenge. I think that, again, this certainly fits why we have the podcast, and the whole reason for that, right, is to learn from one another, to learn ideas, to not have all the answers, right, but to try to propose solutions to help move things forward, because we all are passionate about the medical affairs field and the impact that we can have, and really shifting this from more of this just the support pillar to the strategic pillar within pharmaceutical industry. So your contributions to that are, I can already see those within your own company, how you're talking. And I just want to thank you for taking time to share it with a broader audience, because I think we're all aligned in that mission. It's just trying to figure out how to do it. And you've given us some great potential steps to take to advance that cause. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I think what you guys do is great, and I just thanks so much.
Well, we'll definitely have you back. Like I said, I can't wait to learn more about how you've been able to advance things like the scorecard potentially down the road, et cetera. That'll be fun to have. And we'll learn from it. So with that, thank you so much, listeners, for joining us for another casual conversation here at MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. Remember, leaders don't develop in isolation. We learn from one another. So until next time, learn well.